What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hollywood Already Did It, your weekly podcast for movies that have been rebooted, remade, sequelized, or are otherwise unoriginal and uninspiring. Of course, I am your host, Blake Schultz, and with me is Terrence Tatum.
Hello, everyone.
And our guest for the week from the Killer Horror Critic podcast, Matt Konopka.
Hello, all. How's it going?
And we are doing Fantasy Island, the movie that came out this week or last week, depending on when we put this episode up.
I've lost all track of time, thanks to Fantasy Island.
No, I know those 2 hours well. Blumhouse now owes me a debt.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll get invited to go on a vacation to a mysterious island, Blake.
That would be fine, as long as my fantasy is to not see the movie again.
Well, I'm sure if you're going there, it'll be a boring fantasy, because that's what they all are.
See that through to the end.
All the way to the end.
The bitter end.
The mini 5 or 6 endings that this film has.
I mean, it really just played out a greatest hits of every horror movie that's better than it at the end there.
Which is basically everything.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what did everyone think of the movie?
Matt, you're the guest here. Let's have you kick this one off.
What did I think? It's a train wreck. My fantasy would be for no one to ever have to experience this movie, willingly or not.
Yeah.
I just think that, like you said, Blake, it's a concoction. It's kind of like someone watched a horror film once and thought, I can do that. and that's really what it is. I mean, the first hour just kind of drags along through some awful direction and pacing.
Some terrible acting, too.
And some terrible acting. I'll say this. I think the actors are the best part of it outside of the setting. The setting's very nice. I'm sure everyone got a nice vacation to the island. But no, yeah, it's horribly paced. I felt like time made no sense on the island. We'd leave one character walking into a room at one point and then come back to them 20 minutes later having just walked into the room, and then you have just all of these different cheap horror quote-unquote scares. I lost track of how many times something walked by the camera or appeared and disappeared.
Yeah.
And it's a concoction of a bunch of cliches for a reboot that no one asked for.
Yeah. I mean, that's fairly accurate. You know what's crazy? Okay, so
No.
I'm old enough I just missed the run of Fantasy Island television series. But I did see a lot of it in syndication as I was growing up. So I'm aware of the show. And like this movie does do the setup of like bringing people on a plane and not explaining time. That's a part of what that show did. Kind of just did weird shit like that all the time. Kind of like, all right, fine,
Right.
we're just in it. It was a little bit more, because that was an Aaron Spelling 80s era show, it was a little bit more campy as opposed to this. But I think you can get away with that then in a TV series that's like long form, whereas in a film, the TV series only used two people stories at a time. This one has like 5, and it's trying to juggle way too many balls at one time.
Yeah, I know. It's trying to go like this anthology route. Where the director even admitted himself, it's like 5 mini horror movies. And my thought was, well, no, it's not. When you keep interrupting every single story.
One of them, and then you try to all of a sudden make them interact. It's just a weird way, because the thing that made the Fantasy Island stuff work back in the day is that their stories when they happened on the episode were completely separate from each other.
Right.
When you start trying to put in fantasies and mixing them together, then you're dealing with time that these times don't quite mesh. When you're like, oh, this one is 5 years ahead now, and then these guys are still here, and like,
right. And now this one's in the past.
Yeah, and I'm like, what the hell is happening?
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in this that I do think I like. The third act of this movie just completely implodes on itself, and that's when it just outright loses me. I think an hour and a half of this is a setup that it goes on for a little too long, but I'm okay with that. I was writing that.
Yeah.
If you pay me off on the back end, I can justify being there for that long. The back end of this movie is terrible.
Right, and that's part of it too. Is when it comes to film, like the way you walk out with the ending is going to really affect how you feel about the movie. Correct. So even if I was pretty much out of this after like 20 minutes, but even if you make it through to the third act and you're enjoying it,
right,
it's so bad that
terrible.
I can't imagine many people are going to walk out and think that was a good time, because the movie leaves you with such a sour taste in your mouth.
Yeah.
You had mentioned it's campy too. I think a big problem that the show is campy. I think a big problem with Fantasy Island actually is that it didn't lean into the campiness.
Well,
of
it didn't pick a lane at all. Like either be
Right.
straight up horror and go full on blood and gory, which it did not do, or like you said, lean into the fact that you could be campy or supernatural. It did none of that. It kind of just treaded this little water, lack of a better term, water the entire time and without picking a lane.
Right. Well, it's just, I mean, when it comes to horror, like, there obviously are a lot of really campy examples of films that people love. And, being a horror fan myself, I love shit like Tammy and the T-Rex with Denise Richards dating this dinosaur that has the brain of Paul Walker, right? Like, I love campy stuff like that. The problem with Fantasy Island is you have to understand that you're dealing with a very kind of silly concept here, and you cannot treat that so seriously, because if you do, you start taking it serious and then pulling at threads. You're like, this stuff just doesn't work. Right, you start shoving in stuff that doesn't quite work. It doesn't fit the story, and then I just think they would have been way better off had they just leaned into, all right, we know this is stupid, let's make it stupid, let's not try to do anything more than that. And they didn't do that.
Well, I've never really seen a movie have such strict rules at the beginning and at the same time explain to you nothing. Because you arrive and Michael Pena has his exposition moments of, well, everyone gets a fantasy. We've got to see it through to the end. And it's not what it seems. You're right. But then we get time travel. You jump back from your time travel, but now you don't have these memories, but should you have the memories? And has the world around you changed? If you go back in time to a war and you change a mission, does everything happen? Like, if my fantasy is to, stop 9/11, will I wake up and the entire world have never gone through it? Or do I just get, a day where I can see the towers again? What are we really doing?
Right.
You also get into the whole, it's somebody else's fantasy, but everybody still has to go through their fantasy because they are on the island, so the rules apply to them even though it's in it. We get very, Inception-based with our rule playing, but without being before your fantasy can be fulfilled, the person whose fantasy is happening now has to go through.
But then the other side of that, too, though, is the way I kind of understood it by the end, and I don't know if you're doing, spoilers now at this point, but by the way it seems to wrap up, it's that, okay, well, they're living these fantasies, but they're not quite their fantasies, yet they have to live them out to the end. And I get this impression that the island doesn't actually turn all of your fantasies against you. It's doing that because of someone else's fantasy, right?
Right.
So why do you really have to go through all of these to the end then if it's not actually your fantasy? Just everything starts to just snowball into
that's a problem when you're trying to juggle so many different stories and then combine them together, because that is a rule that is also on the TV shows. You have to see through your thing through the very end. It's much easier when you're doing a 1-to-1 ratio. All right,
and what does the end mean?
It's usually in the
What
show.
is the end of the fantasy?
Yeah. If my fantasy is go to Disney for a day, it's go to Disney for a day. That ends.
Right.
But if my fantasy is to have a job with a salary forever, do I just
or a
work
family
that job? Right.
Yeah,
the end of that is their death.
Well, usually on the show, the Ricardo Montalban show, it was a morality play. That's basically what each show was about. It was I'm doing this to show you a moral compass of yourself. Sort of Saul. What he's I'm trying to prove a point. I'm trying to show you something. This movie does these fantasies, but there's really no point to any of them. There is no moral compass. And the only one person that has one is well, she's bat. You're saying that it's because this person was teased out. They are batshit crazy.
Right. Yeah, it's not a good message for bullying.
Yeah, that was my biggest, I think, problem with these characters and the big spoiler alert for Fantasy Island. The twist that they're in somebody else's fantasy. It's Lucy Hale's character, and her entire arc has been that I was bullied, and it was so bad, and I'm not really that person.
But I am.
But I am that person. So then we're going to make your bully sympathetic, but she also was a bad person, and wasn't just a bad person in high school. She's cheating on her husband. Yeah. She's doing all these awful things.
But Blake, we get a whole speech from her about how she understands she's doing wrong things.
So it's one of those ones that all right, so that whole scene made me kind of roll my eyes.
God, yes.
Because you're talking to, she does the word thing where she's talking to one person, but obviously.
Also, that's not how apologies work.
Yeah.
You don't get to apologize to two people at the same time.
But
yes, you do if you're talking to one on the phone and looking at the other.
But it's done in such a way that the director's look how clever I am. And I was like, oh, stop.
But this goes to my point
Guys.
about the campiness, though, is everyone working on this movie thinks that they're doing something more intelligent than they are.
And really...
And like, it's not to insult anybody. It's just
Right.
like, I don't care if your movie's stupid. It's fine.
Yeah.
Just don't act like you're doing more than you are.
Yeah, I would have rather this had gone the way of like the Broken Lizard, whatever island that episode, the movie that they had on that was on.
Oh, yeah.
This is if they went that way, I'd be like, okay, cool, I'm in, because this
Right.
is like there are moments when like the brothers, which those are the characters that I absolutely hated the way that they interacted.
They got me out of the movie
yeah.
right
I was like, I'm
away
out.
with the high
yeah.
fives and the
Yeah.
dialogue and this
No, I'm just
goofy fantasy.
I was just watching them and I'm like, I
movie
know
are they
people
in?
don't actually talk like
Right.
this. Like,
Yeah, I was like, what movie where are they at? Because they're not with Maggie Q, because she's in something
No,
completely different than everybody
it felt
else.
like every character had their own director
Yeah.
to be like, okay,
Right.
but we're gonna make a Saw movie, and they're gonna make like a Photograph type movie, and we're gonna make a fun like What If Bad Boys was John Lovitz and Dana Carvey, and
Lucy had
and
you
then
You're
seen
gonna
here's
make-
Maggie Q's drama
Yeah.
shit that we
and
don't
we're
care
gonna
about.
make a war movie.
Yeah, and then Lucy,
Break.
you will be in, I don't know, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer? How's that? All right, cool. Everybody go.
Okay, but look, it's how I know it. That's my biggest problem with this movie is it's an adaptation of Fantasy Island, which means right off the bat we're not very original. But then if we really get into, this is gonna be a weird thing to say, you can be original in a property that's unoriginal. You can reboot
Come
this
up
and
with
give it a
something
new
new, yeah,
idea
correct.
to do with it, and instead. It is like Saw, where it's, oh, I have this moral compass, and you did something, and now I'm going to torture you for it until you realize what you did, and if you want to change, you have to escape, but we'll see how badly you really want that. Then it's, I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yeah.
Then it's like this, whichever Scream twist you want it to be, Scream
Right.
4. And then the last kill is just Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
So we just start playing off.
It's like 7 endings at the end.
It's
I was
like a
this is
Now
this-
That's What I Call Horror, Volume
is.
5.
I can't wait for the director's commentary where they're just like, and look, I don't know if you guys noticed this here, but this is totally a reference to Friday the 13th.
I don't know if you noticed that I watched 4 horror movies
directly before filming.
because Jason Blum looked at me and he said, I don't think you've watched a horror movie in your life. And I said, you know what, Jason, you're right. And I went down to my local video store and I got 4 of them.
And look, and here's my other thing too, which is why, like, I get so confused on the decisions made around movies like this sometimes, because to me it seems like a simple solution, right? So we're spending a lot of time talking about how all these stories don't really gel together, yet at the same time, the film gives us an example of multiple characters sharing the same fantasy,
Right.
like the 2 brothers. So would it have really been so fucking difficult to just have 4 characters that are all there to experience a similar fantasy? And just keep them together and not do all this juggling.
That would have been a much better story thread. Just like, all right, you guys are
Yeah.
all sharing the exact same fantasy.
Right, and you can all still learn something,
Right.
and it doesn't have to constantly be split up, so we can stay
Yeah.
where we are with the story.
All of their fantasies could have revolved around the fire.
Yep.
We could have had one person get away and find the rock. We didn't need Michael Rooker doing this like
Why was he
Rambo
there?
story.
He wasn't
Because,
there. He was
Terrence,
there
they
for
kept-
name value.
They kept picking out things.
He's
from,
the
like,
harbinger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They kept picking out things from like a writing 101 book and was like, well, we need a MacGuffin.
Yeah.
So that needs to be somewhere so they have a place to go, or else there's no stakes and we don't know what they're doing. How about a crystal that controls the island? That's great. How will they find it? I don't know.
Yeah.
I know. We have to have this guy who will be like the Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he'll
I know
get them
everything.
there,
Right.
and then
Yeah.
we'll go back to the phone. Like they kept pulling things out of a playbook, and instead of like writing the destination to get there, they just gave you the
And
destination.
then,
Yeah.
what bothered me even more than Rooker being there, they then felt the need to have to give him a backstory as to why. Like, if he's there at this point, just have him be there. But then they're like, yo, his daughter was, and now you guys remind him of his
You
daughter. I'm
remind
like,
me of my daughters.
go
Now I have a
fuck
personal
yourself.
investment.
Well, and I also love how the nonsensicalness of it, where it's like, okay, so he's a PI who's there to discover the secrets of the island or whatever, right? He's been there for weeks now at this point.
No
and
one knows he's
a-
missing.
No one knows he's missing, and he knows a way off the island. It's just like,
Well, he also says that Michael Pena's aware of him.
Correct.
He's like, oh, he won't let
But
me
they
get near
have
the hotel.
No
And I'm like,
interaction at all in this film.
and seemingly you can change your fantasies on a whim. So like one day when Michael Pena doesn't want his wife back, why didn't he just go look at the crystal and be like, kill Michael Rooker?
Yeah.
My fantasy is to kill the only threat to my island. Do it.
yeah. go crystal thing.
Go, water!
Can I also just say, I love how this is now a few movies now where it seems like Blumhouse is on this black water equals evil kind of kick, because they also did a similar thing with Black Christmas.
Yeah.
Just a thing that I noticed.
It's a very weird trope that I feel like we're getting more and more of that
Dirty
sort
water
of
is
solves like the R rating,
Well,
but
like,
still
because it
look
makes up
bloody.
for blood.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It reminds me of like when Ocarina of Time came out in the N64 and they're like, no, the blood's green, so it's an E rating.
No, and separately, it's like, okay, whatever. It's just that you did this back to back with 2 big releases from the studio within 2 months. It's just, I don't know. It's a little.
Just wait until the Invisible Man gets tar thrown on him to be seen.
Water.
Look, we had a lot of black goo left over from a canceled Creature from the Black Lagoon remake. If I don't use it, it expires, and it gets everywhere. We had to
Very
use
messy.
it. So I've made 5 cheap horror movies, and I'm just going to keep putting it in there. But look, as long as it makes $7 million,
I'm not taking that
good.
much of an L.
yeah, we'll talk about that towards the end of the show, but it's amazing to me that it can be like, we came in 4th this weekend, but we did double our earnings. It's like, why isn't every studio doing this?
Yeah.
Right.
We talked about the show a little bit.
Yeah.
It ran first, it was 2 TV movies.
Correct. That's what it started off at.
Explaining the rules.
Yes.
Ran for 6 seasons.
6 to 7 years, yeah. It was
into
78 to
the-
84.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did we think? Was this faithful to the show? We can talk about the show a
Yeah.
bit.
So, I mean,
Terrence,
look,
you know it better than I do, because
think,
you're old.
Because I am dying.
Well, we're all dying.
Yeah, no, look, there are things that the show does immediately. Like, if this movie opens with Michael Pena coming down and saying, smiles, everyone, smiles, everyone. That was the whole opening, like, scene to every single one of the Fantasy Island episodes. They would show the plane landing. They would show him getting ready to meet the guests as they come off the plane. And he would say, smiles, everyone, let's get to go. Obviously, in the TV show, tattoo was a big part of that, which, spoilers, that somewhat comes around towards the end of this, but
In the
worst
worst way
way.
possible.
Yeah. But that's all a part of the show, and then he kind of separates the two. Well, in this case, 5, but usually he separates the 2 people, and they just have like a whole campy Aaron spelling. And remember, this came around the era where this was blocked in the same 2-hour block with Love Boat, so it was like it was this in Fantasy Island.
The next movie with black water.
Oh, God, I can't wait.
We're gonna do a horror Love Boat, and it was super campy, super like Twilight Zone-ish, but like a funnier version of that or a campier version of that. Like,
Right, it was like an adventure comedy, right?
yeah. And then there was a remake of this in like the late 90s, 98.
Yeah.
It only lasted like 14 episodes with Malcolm McDowell playing the Mr. Rourke spot. Barry Sonnenfeld produced that one, so it was a little bit more Beetlejuice, Men in Black-esque as far as like the way that people got to the island and all of that stuff. They had a whole travel agent. So the concept around the episodes and the movie are basically, the structure is there. It's essentially the same. It's just the way about going about it is very different. This is clearly leaning more into, well, not really, because it's not really a horror film, but it's leading more into taking itself more serious, whereas that was more tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those shows were great because that was like a star vehicle. It was kind of like one of those like Murder, She Wrote things where like we were going to get the top actors,
Get the heavies
to
as
kinda
Once
come in
Upon a
and
Time
play.
in Hollywood would say.
Yeah. But I think the gist of doing the fantasies is there as far as like, all right, this is the moral story that we want to tell. I just don't think this does a good job of paying it all off.
It's an interesting thing because you can be very faithful to a show and completely misunderstand what made it work.
Yeah.
And
Which happens a lot.
It happens so more often than I want it to, where the other movie we're talking about this week is Sonic, which is kind of an oddly good comparison of something that threw out so much of its source material but like nailed what its character is.
yeah.
Where this like copy and pasted
The source material.
The plane's coming and smiles
Right.
everyone and here's what it is, and it looks like Fantasy Island to the untrained eye.
Right.
But I think kind of some of the biggest things it's missing are like kind of the 3 points that the show always had. Was there was like a cost of a fantasy, the nature of a fantasy, and the risk of a fantasy.
Yeah.
So there were people who like spent money to get to the island. And there were people, you know, they had the episode with the girl and her piggy bank where it's like less than $10, but there's a special interest in that.
And they wouldn't always show the cost to it, just because sometimes they would just open with the plane, but sometimes they would go back and be like, all right, this is the money they spent. Or in the newer one, they would show actually the whole how the message got from the travel agency to the island. It was more of a connection. Like, we're sending people here to do this thing, and it was pricey.
Right.
And sometimes they would pay for it. Like, all right, it's a pro bono. We're going to give you your fantasy because you know someone here, or we're gifting this to you.
Which I think is an interesting way to build a character and show what they want without doing this like hyper exposition that this movie did. If all these people had come in without like a short Qualtrics survey that was 1 page long.
I mean, it's just like, I mean, it's like you don't want the film to run longer because it's already at fucking 2 hours.
No, I want it to run a lot shorter.
And I do too, but at the same time, I agree with you. We could have used something to set these people up, because I mean, a big issue that I have with the film is it feels like it's running like a freight train, right? Like, it does not try to slow itself down ever. It's always just go, 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 go. Like, as soon as they get to the island, it's okay, here's Mr. Rourke, and now you're all running off to your own fantasies, and we're not going to really get to know who you are as people. We're just going to throw you right in. So just like, it would have been nice to have something, like, I've never really seen the show, but something like you're talking about to establish who these people are, why this matters to them.
I think the biggest issue is that this movie is actively trying, like, replicating aspects of the show. But unfortunately, when you're doing a show, you have the long form. You can, if you're doing this 24 episodes and you're doing this day to day, you can get away with just dropping people in media res and like, cool. When you're doing a movie, this is the only time that I'm spending time with you. You got to kind of give me a little bit more meat on the bones and let me know how these people got to this point. Just saying, oh, I took a 1-page survey and, well, that's it. Cool.
Right. Well, a 1-page survey and, oh, I just won a random contest that we all happen to enter, even though we're all related, as we find out by the end. So.
Well, I think the trick there is, because you're right, when you're doing a TV show, you can explain the cost and the nature and the risk, but you can also do that in a movie fairly quickly. I look at the first 2 Saw movies, specifically Saw 2, that had 7-8 characters, but so quickly we're just like, here's who they are and why they're here what's going to happen.
It's just good writing, guys. Like, you know, you watch the film Up, you learn an entire story of those that old couple within 5 minutes. I mean, like, you're crying for them by the end of it. It's 5 minutes long.
I would say Jumanji is probably a recent one that, like, I'll explain the rules in the first 20 minutes and then we're off. And you're like, oh, cool, I got it. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Like, it's still the big problem is just that they were trying to do too much. You know, you're trying to do this whole anthology thing. And again, I think you should have simplified it so that the audience is able to kind of understand a bit better and stay with the characters. Because then if you are just dropping them off on the island and jumping in, then at least we're staying with them to watch them kind of build and grow together. Yeah. You know, but you don't get that either. So.
Yeah. It feels like the director obviously did watch one of the old shows. It's like, because that's what the old show does. They spend an entire time with one character and then they switch back to the other one. And kind of it's almost they repurpose a lot of the shows as 2 half-hour shows. Kind of like, well, we have enough to just split these episodes off. And he looked like that's what they were trying to do with this. Like, let's go from this one and then go to this one and go to this one. The problem is you got 5 of them. You need to, like, I could easily got rid of the duo brothers and the dad with the father and just have it back to you and the young girl, and then if you want to do one guy, that's fine.
Well, and it is a lot of people to juggle, but it is also that they tried to give everybody a substantial character arc, and Michael Pena and Michael Rooker didn't need big arcs. They just kind of had to be set pieces almost. And like, part of Fantasy Island was just, look at this weird dude. And we don't know his backstory. Yep. We don't know what's going on. They did it the way a lot of these old, like, even James Bond used to be that kind of character where it was like, don't worry about who he is or what he's doing. We just throw him into adventures and he's cool and suave and fun. Yeah.
And you never like on the show in the 7 years, it never explains the island. Like, we don't do the whole crystal thing. It just is. It could be purgatory. It could not be. We just all right, we're in.
There's a lot of
things. And arguably they would have been much better off not explaining it too, because I mean, at the end of it, they haven't stopped the island by any means, so why do we even need to go down there and discover the crystals?
They're not really reinventing the wheel either. We know how these kind of movies work. We know how a Monkey Paw works. We know how Wish Upon works. I don't need you to be like, look, your fantasy might not turn out the way you want it to, and it's like, I understand that. It's baked into the DNA of this kind of movie.
Right.
And this is part of the thing too with you know, I feel like this is a problem in modern movies as well, because I feel like older films didn't do this as much, but modern films, I feel like, always have this need to explain to the audience, to talk down to the audience. We're not allowed to just assume anything anymore, you know? It's like, let me spoon feed you every ounce of information we think you might need to know. And the thing the studios, execs, directors, writers, they all have to understand, we are watching a horror movie. Like, we're paying to go see this movie. We know that that's what we're coming in to watch. You don't have to explain everything. Just set up that this is an island that bastardizes these fantasies of yours,
and I'm accepting
that's all we need.
I'm in.
And
you're
then,
accepting it. You're buying a ticket to go to a horror film. You're not one of those people, if you're buying the ticket to see that movie, that is none of this stuff could ever happen.
Correct.
Like, you're willing, by buying the ticket, you're willing to suspend your disbelief.
Yeah.
So don't explain it all.
And I think also, you know, if you're going to bastardize the fantasies, the fantasies.
Do a little more
Get
there.
in there.
That was probably my least favorite part of the movie was that there was never a really be careful what you wish for. Like,
Not at
Maggie
all.
Q just gets her family. They sort of hint when the daughter's like, well, you can never live here. And it's like, well, what does that mean?
If Maggie
Like,
Q didn't, for the purposes of the script, want to just all of a sudden change her mind, she could have just been fine in hers.
Right, she's just hanging out with her daughter and husband,
which,
you know?
there's another good way to balance out your characters. Have one whose fantasy works and they bounce.
disappear.
And then everyone can, like, feel more comfortable doing it.
No.
Like, have the first one that he takes right away, their works, and they're off, and it's like, this is amazing. And then you can lull them into that false sense of security.
The fucking soldier story. Let's torture him a little bit, you know? Let's do something. Like, he gets captured by these other soldiers.
No, we're just going to slowly walk through the woods for 30 minutes.
And that was a big problem, too, is this movie is... It was the weirdest thing for me because, like I mentioned, it's moving at a freight train rate. Like, I almost felt like it's going so fast because it's like it knows it's not working, so it feels like if it moves really fast, people won't notice, you know? But at the same time, everything is slow.
Yeah.
You know, all these stories are progressing so slowly.
The Maggie Q waking up, her whole
gotta
sequence
go-
was long. It just felt forever.
Well, we had to
Yeah.
keep learning the same information with her.
Right.
Yeah,
We had
over
to.
and over.
You're gonna go back in time, and you're gonna go talk to your husband, and then we have to have a 5-minute conversation of her being like, "I don't understand.
Right.
You're an actor. Drop the act." And then we had to do that with every single character.
Yeah.
We kept doing this same scene of, oh, well, this is fake, and now this, and them realizing it's real. Once one person realizes it's real, I don't need you to have it happen with everybody else. You're just clunking up your movie by repeating
and a lot of
information.
stuff either sped up or slowed down based on how quickly they needed to progress the plot, because those girls were walking forever, and then all of a sudden she's like, "Ooh, the phone," and then they were all the way right back into the day. Like, wait, what?
Fast travel's been unlocked on Fantasy Island. It is also, once we got into the time travel aspects, that also opened up a lot of questions to me of just, now what? If we save this dad, is the entire world different?
So that's where this becomes messy to me, because the fantasies never merged. And that's when I was like, okay, now the threads are starting to come out the loose, because in this, when you start merging fantasies, then I'm like,
Also, who's sending a secret ops team to Venezuela to stop these terrorists who have just decided today to get revenge on a house that somebody bought?
I'm like, that doesn't even make sense within
What
their world.
Call
how
of
they're
Duty
right.
bonus level is that?
It doesn't even make sense within their world where that would be the mission. Like, none of that made sense. It's like, okay, you're now losing me, because that's when the third act falls apart. When you start merging these fantasies, none of it actually makes any sense whatsoever. And I was like, that's why this show's actively separated these fantasies from each other.
Well, right.
You can't. It's already hard when you're playing this like, oh, butterfly effect, we all were there at the same time thing. But when you start doing that, and then they all have their own fantasies, and we have to bring it all back together, you're just juggling like 75 things.
And then once you bring it all back together, then the twist is like, twists! None of this that you've seen already matters.
Oh,
Nothing we saw for an hour and 20 minutes means a damn.
The twist in that movie was like if we saw Wizard of Oz and there was a man behind the curtain, and then somebody else was like, don't look behind this second curtain either. And then there was a third curtain and a fourth
and
curtain.
then that wizard had a curtain.
It's like this stupid
Yeah.
dude, you keep taking off masks, you're like, Jesus Christ, who did this? Because we keep doing... Yeah.
No, when Lucy Hale drops that twist bomb, my head exploded. Like I was just like, wait. So this is all your fantasy, but you're letting them all live their fantasies, but you want them all back here so you can what is going on here?
I've never gotten tired Not like sleepy tired, but like I just ran a mile tired in a movie before.
Yeah.
And this was probably the first time where it was, we're now in the cave, and I have to talk to my daughter who's going to tell me I'll never be loved.
Right.
And then this character has to talk to the guy and be told that his family will never love him. And now the bully has to talk to the old bully who's moving around like a conjuring
For
puppet.
reasons.
For no reason whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then we have to go talk to the dad who died. And I just kept being like, oh my God, are we going to just back to back have these like face your fear scenes?
That's the problem.
And then Michael Pena has to go through his arc and talk to his wife.
So
and
when you give
Lucy
everyone
Hale has to reveal who she is.
a
and
story
then,
arc, then you have to try and quote unquote resolve all of those story arcs, and then instead of having it in a break,
keep
like back to
passing
back.
I mean, it's like you
hand
should have just
grenade in
fucking
this-
killed everyone down to Maggie Q and Lucy Hale.
Right.
Like,
And whose fucking fantasy that was we can unpin and repin a grenade 9 times.
oh my God, that was my other thing too. It's like, are you guys for Fantasy Island? Y'all don't seem creative enough to come up with something besides a fucking grenade pin. Like,
Oh, put it back in. Oh, it came out.
I mean,
I dropped it. Jump on it. He's going to die a
seriously.
hero.
I cannot remember a film that made a grenade pin so important as Fantasy Island. That thing was being carried around
For a good
forever.
25
Oh my
minutes of
God.
the film, it was the
and-
linchpin of
right,
the entire
yeah, exactly. And it was used as a threat over and over and over again.
These
It's
guys
like, this
have
is fucking-
rocket launchers
literally-
and guns.
Literally anything is supposed to be able to happen on this island. Can we just think of something else?
Couldn't even like you just get there and if they were like, man, what are we gonna do and destroy the island? Couldn't you have all just been like, my biggest fantasy is for the island to be destroyed and like looked at the rock? Because that was the other weird part is we see the bully's fantasy is, oh, I want to get back together with my husband and I want my life to be okay.
And we
then
care about you now, bully, for some reason.
let's make the bully
She's all of a sudden
sympathetic.
a good person, and when it ends with her getting on
What
the
are
plane,
we
you're like,
telling
wait,
children?
what? Right, I was like, so now we care about the person who apparently has been bullying this girl
Like
forever.
the movie tries
Right.
to be about redemption, but it also goes out of its way to like pick on the person that needs therapy
Right.
and help and
Yeah,
has
like,
like
She was the
mental
bully,
problems.
cheated on her husband, and said, my bad, I just thought you were pulling away from me, so I wanted to go bang
So
something
I
else.
fucked this guy. For some reason, we filmed it.
Well, and this is another problem I have with it too. Is like, you know, look, as a horror fan who's been watching this stuff forever, I get it. Mental illness has not always been portrayed well in the genre. We understand that.
Correct.
But the thing is, it's 2020. You know, so like I can go back, I can watch films from the 80s, 70s, and think,
And
okay,
at that time, it's a product of what the time dealt with.
exactly.
mentally,
I can still appreciate the film because you know what? That's what it was at the time. I get it. Now we know better. We know better now, and you're making it worse.
Yeah.
Like you're not
'Cause then they
you're
make
not
fun
even
of
giving.
her.
What
The
they make fun of
punchline is
her?
like, she only went out with that guy once. Pretty crazy.
No, exactly. They make fun of her and they don't even try to like give her qualities to make her understandable. Like, you know, there's this movie called Maniac that follows this pretty psychopathic guy, but the thing is, you follow him in the movie, so you, even though you don't really like him or anything, you kind of get to understand why he's this way.
Yeah.
We don't get any of that with her.
Because we don't
you know?
spend enough time with her because we're focused on fucking War Dad and
Right. and
nobody-
then just to, you know, maybe this is not correct of me or whatever, but it's also just like, okay, and we're going to say her major problem now at this point is that what she fell for this guy that she didn't even go on a date with.
I finally felt safe.
No. Girl, you don't... It doesn't
Yeah.
seem like you have any problems these days. I mean, you walk right up to Soldier Boy and ask him to fuck. Like, I'm
right,
pretty
like
sure you're
drinking,
okay
you
with...
seem like you're okay with approaching men and
That was all part of the act.
Yeah,
right, like, that
right.
doesn't really seem to be your issue anymore, so...
Yeah, that's a very loose thread to tie all that together. Like, oh, I was
Oh my
supposed to
God.
be there, and then I was like, oh,
It would have
you're-
been really easy to just make all of them like shitty bullies and had the
Yeah.
movie be like, actually, you're all connected to high school.
So who's the
and
first
like,
one to
fuck
learn
you
that
guys?
you guys are
Yeah.
you were a
Well,
dick?
I mean,
And
fucking
yeah.
take it a step further. They all know each other. You know,
Right.
they all know each other. They're all from the high school, and they don't remember Lucy Hale because she's done the cliched thing of, oh, I changed
I
my
prettied
hair and
myself
stuff.
up,
So,
yeah.
I took the glasses off,
I'm
guys.
now wearing a red crop top as opposed to the blue one.
Yeah. It's really hard to recognize Ryu when you hit Y twice in Street Fighter. Right. Like, who is this?
but it's like at least then there's a connection. They know each other. We understand them better, and they can share a similar fantasy. I
Yeah,
don't know.
there was like no manifesto for anybody. There was nothing, again, like Jigsaw, where he is like, oh, well, you know, I'm dying of cancer, and if you don't
No.
value life, you just shouldn't shouldn't have it. And
same-
you're like, I understand that.
And at the same time, what the fuck is with giving us this sympathetic angle towards Mr. Rourke? Excuse me, bud, you're killing all these people and keeping your fucking dying wife who dies over and over again alive. Like, and you're trying to make us like you? Like,
So,
the movie went out of its way to be like, but what if our villains?
So that's the weird thing too, because the TV series, when somebody got in like mortal danger where they were died, that would be the only time that he would step in and be like, hold on, we can't have anybody actually dying here. This guy, after the brother dies, like, your brother died. So my wife is having a hard time. I'm like, wait, my brother's dead?
Just look at the ultimate message of this movie is by the end, the guy who orchestrated all this shit, he's fine. We feel nice for him now, or we're supposed to. The fucking gay guy is the only one that gets fucking trapped at the island.
Right.
And then the goddamn girl who's bullied is our fucking villain.
And she's and like the one who was the bully and had an affair is getting on the plane like, well, good day, guys.
Yeah, hope y'all had a good one. I'm going to go back to my life and keep cheating on my husband. Like, it just, I don't know, man.
So the movie fails as an adaptation.
Yeah.
Is there any reason, because nostalgia is a freight train that's existed for the end of time.
Of course.
Is there any real reason from like the themes of what this show was, or even the brand, or any conceivable thing that you can think of that we made this movie in 2020? Other than like money is fun.
I mean, this year specifically, no.
Well, it's early. It's only February.
Right. Personally, I don't have a problem with it being rebooted. I mean, because it is, I don't want to say forgotten property, but a property that...
It's not.
Okay, so yeah, more
it's
forgotten.
It's fairly forgotten, yeah.
You know, so I don't have a problem with that because, you know, when it comes to the remakes and reboots, I don't mind them. I think they're fine. They introduce audiences to new products and whatever and franchises, but I do get sick of the fact that we keep just doing it with stuff that everyone knows for like the back of their hands.
Right.
You know, so I do like when we get a reboot of something like Fantasy Island.
That's a pretty obscure title overall.
Right. And can maybe use an update and whatever.
Right.
As for, do we need it right now? I mean, I don't know, man. The world's pretty shitty. It's nice to indulge in fantasies, but...
That's a good answer, because I've just been racking my brain.
I think the concept of like, oh, you get to have your own fantasy, especially today, would have been a better play out had they done more with the current climate and how like I do need to just get away, or I do need to just kind of escape, or make it a morality play. Like this movie actively gets away from that, and that's sort of what the linchpin of the TV series was. I don't necessarily know if it was necessary to happen, because this show is also, when you watch it, if you watch any of the episodes, it is clearly a product of its time. Like it's 100% an 80s.
Well, yeah, I mean, towards the end, Tattoo was coming up in a go-kart to announce the plane coming, and staff had to dodge him.
Yeah, it's like a weird thing. He's going in playing the plane, and then the Malcolm McDowell one's also very kitschy and like. So they're products of their time. So I think you could have just perfectly left these alone and done something else with a morality story, as opposed to like digging that up, because then you have to force yourself to live in this structure where you clearly have written yourself into a corner.
Well, I think those themes of morality play and fantasy aren't always what they want it to be, and even like escapism are always going to be kind of like worth doing and worth telling.
Sure.
Which is why it's sort of a shame when we put like a bad coat of paint on it.
Yeah.
Because I think when you hit those, we don't really get tired of it. We still have plenty of movies that are just like, but the power of friendship.
Yeah.
So we can clearly do this, but when the moral of your story seems to be, fuck it. Because we didn't even like, there's not even the moral of the story of like revenge doesn't always give you what you want. Like we saw in Birds of Prey, it's a throwaway bit when Harley Quinn is like, you know, if you're really just out for revenge, it very often doesn't give you the catharsis you're looking for and leaves you sadder. So like, would a better ending to this movie have been that Lucy Hale succeeds and kills them and then goes home and it just doesn't feel
just
better?
Still, yeah.
And then like tries to go back and is like, no, like could she have just been re-upping the fantasy until someone was like, hey, like, go to therapy?
I mean, I don't know how satisfying...
Now you're a murderer, though.
I don't know how satisfying that ending would have been, but it definitely would have played into the theme better, I think, because it was her fantasy to get vengeance, right? And it's not supposed to go well, so she would get home and realize, oh shit, my life still sucks.
I'm still alone. I'm a murderer.
Right.
Nobody told me that the bodies would be in the apartment with my DNA everywhere.
Yeah.
Because that was the other weird part about this movie from a world-building perspective, is they did what I kind of want more horror movies to do. Like Countdown doesn't do it at all, where they ignore that this app exists and there's videos and forums and why doesn't everyone know about this? This movie kind of does that when they're like, oh, on Reddit I read this, and on Twitter it's this, and there's Yelp reviews and all of these things. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, we know it exists and people talk about it, but we don't fully know what it is. However, aren't people like straight up missing? And this whole like fantasies are like dreams and you'll get back and be hazy. So should there not even be Reddit posts? Is everybody just waking up like it's a dream?
It's very
But if your
convenient.
fantasy is to have a family and you wake up from that, shouldn't you remember? Like, no, death makes it fall apart.
They do a convenient thing of the
Pick a
people
lane.
that get on the island are like the only person that has an attachment to somebody outside of that would be the blonde girl who her husband did say that she was missing for 2 days. Like that's the one thing that actually Maggie Hughes is single. The brothers are alienated from their parents, so it's kind of like they all have a reason why that no one is actively checking for them. It's just very convenient that every single one of them had that going for them.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it feels a little too convenient, a little hand wavy,
Right.
For how all this exists. Because, the thing with the island too is like, okay, we're set up to believe that it bastardizes all of your fantasies, and it's possible people have died here before, yet it doesn't really seem to be in the public consciousness, yet it's in the
people are
consciousness
dying,
of people
yeah.
knowing about the island. So it creates too many questions, and this is a big problem with movies like this. Like, writers need to understand, the more questions you create, the more answers you have to give, or your audience is going to pick your movie.
Yeah.
The more, because your audience will start picking your movie apart. So,
Right.
like, I would have been much happier with had we had an opening where, let's say, these characters are on a cruise ship or something, or like some kind of boat trip. They get, something happens, a storm, whatever. They get stranded, show up on this island. They meet Mr. Rourke, and then they begin to experience these fantasies. Like, because at least then you don't have to explain how they got here
Right.
and how this thing exists in the world and everything. You just go with it at that point. So
right.
Yeah, and they're like he said earlier, I do think horror movies have the caveat of being like, all right, if I know what the premise is, I'm in. Like you don't
Right.
have to, like Happy Death Day is two of my favorite movies that have existed in the last 5 years. They don't overly explain like we're in. If you don't know this, well, F it.
Well,
I
a
don't care.
great example is any ghost film you've ever seen in your life.
Right.
You don't go into the ghost film and have, fucking 20 minutes of exposition of someone being like, well, let me explain to you how ghosts exist.
When you die,
Hear me out.
a ghost.
No, exactly. Like, you're going to see the movie. You fucking know that that's what you're going to see. You
Right.
don't need all of that. So,
Yeah.
no.
Oh, man. So then, I think we all pretty much saw this movie out of professional curiosity, for lack of a better word. If we weren't doing these podcasts and these shows, would the marketing have gotten you in? Was there any reason you would have been interested in this?
No, I don't think the trailers worked at all for this movie.
No.
Because the trailers did the one thing that if you're making a film that, especially if it has the Blumhouse title and you're supposed to be a horror movie, the trailers don't make this seem like it's going to be scary at all.
To be fair, it's not.
Right. They had nothing to work with. Like the editor's like, Jesus, guys, I've got nothing. I can't make this look scary at all.
Oh, I feel so bad for the editor of this movie.
And I think that is why I really had no desire to see this outside of my morbid curiosity of being a quasi fan of the original show. Because
Right.
I see Rourke wearing his all white and I see him coming in and saying smile. Like I was like, oh, that could be kind of cool. And then, but the actual stuff that was happening, I was like, oh, this doesn't look like anything that I have any interest to ever watch it.
Yeah, no, like I'll go see every horror film, and I did have to see this professionally, but no, the marketing did nothing to get me in. Like, I kind of liked the poster with the skull face.
The poster was pretty.
The poster with the water halfway breaking and there's like a definite skull at the bottom.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, that's kind of creative. All right,
Yeah,
cool.
the posters were cool, but no, the trailer. I mean, a lot of us have gotten really good at reading trailers, and we can be wrong. But there was nothing in this, like Terrence said, there was nothing in this that was selling me on this being a proper horror twist on the story.
See, I liked the first trailer when we were
No.
focusing on like the dumb jokes of, oh, well, there's no service, so not anything's possible, and this big
No.
house party, and then we like get to this Saw torture scene. I was like, this could be. I think also right off the bat when they're like, we're making Fantasy Island, I am like, no.
Yeah.
There's like a very weird line for years where if you're remaking something past like 79, I'm like, but why?
Yeah.
Why are we going this far back? I don't think the 13 to 24-year-olds that you want so desperately care.
Well, I don't think this.
Certainly don't.
Well, that's a big problem with this movie too. That I don't really think we talked about is who is this movie for?
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's PG-13, so it's clear that they were trying to get teenagers in there, but teenagers don't know what the hell Fantasy Island is. Like, they don't care about that.
I mean, yes, it is, but I think this has a similar issue that Black Christmas had. Is it wasn't made to be PG-13. You know, it was
right.
It was made with all of those the language and the gore and whatever to be an R film.
Somewhere in the process, they're like, let's cut this down because we
can make more money if it's PG-13.
Yeah.
Exactly,
and the movie is not good enough.
Audiences smell that stuff out. You know, like it's very clear watching the film that they knew they had a disaster on their hands, so they cut out all the extra stuff they could to make it a PG-13 to get audiences in. Black Christmas is the exact same thing. I don't fucking care what those writers and directors say. They can say it all they want. They did not make that movie for little girls.
Right.
Correct.
So it was never that case.
And Black Christmas is at least easy enough to narrow down that it's like, this isn't a 4-quadrant film. It's a 2-quadrant. We want the 13 to 24-year-olds. We want to make the woke movie about this thing and miss the mark. This movie is in a very weird place because I think had we even pushed for the R rating,
I still don't know who it would be.
I think fans of the show would go, why are we making an R-rated Fantasy Island?
And this is the thing. You're not pulling in really fans of the old show because it's completely different from what that is. You're not really going to pull in, you know, horror fans like myself, really, who want an adult movie. So.
Yeah.
And then I do think, and maybe I'm wrong because I'm 30 now, but I have to assume that 13 to 24-year-olds, when they see a property that they don't have awareness of, are like, just go do a new thing.
Yeah.
Like, why are you even doing this?
No, exactly. And, you know, I know there's a lot of, and I don't always agree with it, there is a lot of fatigue in the horror community, too, especially because, you know, I don't know if you guys disagree or not, but that genre in particular suffers from remake after remake after remake.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably one of the big, that and sci-fi probably are like some of the biggest ones that keep going back to the well.
Even it's remakes, and it's one of the only genres that gets up to the 10th or 11th movie.
Right, that too. And you know, and I don't have a problem with that necessarily, and there's a lot of, I'm not one of those people who thinks that there's nothing original in horror anymore. It's all in the indie world. But theatrically, yeah, we're just doing this stuff over and over and over again. So I do think the younger audience who is trying to discover new properties, you know, maybe they get a little burnt out by that.
I also think like unlike Black Christmas, at least had girls that look like that would be in the 13 round age. This movie doesn't have anybody that literally looks the age of a 13 to 17-year-old. Like Lucy Hale clearly is a 25-plus-year-old.
Right, so there's no one to really appeal to that age group.
Right.
And I guess outside of the bullying, there's not really anything that like those kids go through.
Yeah.
Right.
But they're also like, if you're in high school now, you are being bullied. You don't really need to go watch a movie of someone who like didn't get over it.
Right.
You especially don't want to go watch them be the villain of the film.
Yeah, no, that's like,
you know,
let's appeal to people going through trauma and then show them that not only will they never get over it,
they will
but it will kill them.
I mean, look, like when I was a kid, you know, I grew up with movies like I don't know if you guys have ever seen Evil Speak, but it's this movie with Clint Howard who's bullied and he gets vengeance on these people. You know, it was all, you know, like Carrie. It was always about the bullied, the victim getting their vengeance, but well, I guess they're still kind of villains in those cases. But
I mean, once you kill somebody,
but at least the bullies die.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, there is a catharsis. I think even when you make your quote unquote hero bad, of it being like, well, they got him.
Right.
Like that's almost what you want to watch. I mean, like. The Invisible Man comes out in 2 weeks, and part of that is like, I want to see this woman get her abuser and like fuck him up.
Well, no, and the thing those movies do well too is, you know, like Carrie, at the end of it, you know, it's not like she's happy that she did that. You know, it's kind of like
she's still miserable. Yeah.
Right. It's like a mental break where this happens, but she regrets it. You know, and that's the other thing those movies do is like, okay, as the bullied, you sympathize with them getting their vengeance, but at the end, you still kind of learn a lesson of like, it's not really worth it.
Yeah.
You know, so there's catharsis, but there's also a message.
And or they something still happens to the bully, the person who does the bullying. In this case, the bullier is like, cool. I'm out.
Well, the person who does the bullying is the villain in those
Right.
movies usually.
Yeah.
You know, like
Or
again,
then-
Carrie, it's the bullies who dump the blood on her.
Yeah.
You know, it's their
Right.
fault this happens.
Correct.
So
And then they usually give you like one, I guess for lack of a better word, like final girl or final character to be like, well, I
sympathetic
wasn't
character.
bullying you, and now I'm the one who can like stop you.
Right.
right, there's
they
usually
often-
a sympathetic character.
Yeah, even like something like it's a bad movie, but Valentine has that where it's like I'm gonna go kill all the people that made fun of me, and it's like, well, you're still gonna die,
right.
Because you've now crossed a line.
And that's
it's
another-
why Batman doesn't kill people.
Yeah, and that's another thing. There's no one sympathetic in this movie. You know, like 'cause
No.
once you kind of learn everything too, it's like, oh, so you're all just fucking cowardly assholes.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
up until the reveal of the twist, Maggie Q seems to be the most sane one. Then you're like, oh, well, you just don't know
Well-
how to stop. You accidentally kill someone, but like
right.
you technically did something wrong too. And like set all
Also,
this-
if you're gonna go
whatever.
back in time to save somebody from a fire, and you're like, this is the moment I regret. Pick the moment you regret as when you didn't turn off the stove and just walk in and turn it off.
not the moment of all hell is broken loose.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Not the moment of
I'm
having to
gonna-
get into the burning
Yeah,
apartment.
yeah, yeah. Instead of being like, I should go play hero and have saved this person, why don't you just go back
like,
and be like, click?
Oh,
But
that
see-
was a bad idea.
But again, this is a problem with movies like this because normally I wouldn't pick that apart. You know, it's just like, all right, whatever, go with it. But
when
there's
you
just
start
so
so
many
much- yep,
questions.
Yep.
Well, because then I go again. If she does that, is this real, like, Back to the Future time
Right, does it
travel?
change anything?
Does Doc Brown need to show up and be like, no, Maggie Q, listen, if you go back in time, you'll create a tangential reality where she will not have killed you. However, your friends on the island will still be killed.
This is the part we really needed Michael Rooker for. That's what he should have been doing, is just popping up in each fantasy being like, you don't want to go that way.
Yeah, he, like, should have been a weird time traveler.
Turn back now.
That's what this movie really needed. It needed, like, a weird Doc
Like-
Brown to just run in and be like, it's all time travel, but if you go back and you save your father, listen to me, son, you're gonna grow up thinking he's a coward, and he won't kiss your mom at the ball, and you'll never be born.
No, for real. Remember the Simpsons episode where it's the Halloween horror-thon or whatever, and Willie keeps showing up in each segment,
Yeah.
trying to like save them or warn them.
Oh, I'm
That's
bad
what,
at this.
yes.
That's what we needed Michael Rooker for, just showing up in every one.
I really wish that this had just picked a lane and either was like creepy
just-
sci-fi
or just
or
go
big
nuts.
horror or like fun camp.
camp,
Because
yeah.
had we had this like a Willy character or some like time traveler who knew it was crazy, and like Michael Pena's a comedic actor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why didn't we like embrace
do
what
his
we
thing.
have?
Yeah.
And because
Well, a lot of them are. A lot of them have a background in comedy.
I liked when Michael Pena was funny in this movie. When he had those moments of like, well, a lot of people just do weird sex stuff. I mean, it's crazy. And why don't you do, while you wait, do some push-ups or squats?
Yeah.
I was like, this is the best part of the
Right.
movie.
Yeah.
I think that was a very real laugh. I guess the last thing to talk about is its box office. As we talked about, it came in last. It's President's Day weekend, has a nice 4-day at the time of this recording. We're on day 3 of that 4-day, and it's at 12 million, eyeing 14 million. It's coming in last behind The Photograph, behind Sonic, Birds of Prey. I was trying to do it in order. Sonic was first, Birds of Prey was second, The Photograph, and then this.
Yeah.
I have no other PG-13 movies to compare it to because Box Office Mojo is a disaster now, and I just did not have the energy to look them up.
I do. Underwater was a recent horror one that really did badly at the
Right.
box office.
Yeah.
But as we kind of talked about, and I think we've talked about in the show before, Blumhouse's secret sauce is don't spend more than $10 million.
Yeah.
And I mean, we'll never see P&A numbers, but the reality is this made back double its production budget, which kind of sucks because right now there's this big narrative of like how bad Birds of Prey is doing, even though it's made up its box office numbers already. And now you have this movie which just made less money and just had less interest.
Just cost
But
less,
because the numbers are this way, we can be like, well, people really want this. Right. And it's like,
Yeah.
And yeah, it's definitely a twisted way to look at it, you know?
and we are now like I'm only gonna talk about this for a little bit, but like Birds of Prey only went down 10 million, which is
it held really
incredible. And like
It's
last
doing much better than people were giving it credit
yeah,
for.
and last weekend I didn't want to be like, well, it just came under expectations. No one's really like making this narrative that it's bad. But if you read these variety articles
They're
today,
still crapping on
it's
it.
like, wow, Sonic is blowing up, and Birds of Prey did
drop
at-
42%.
At
I'm
number
like, that's a
2,
fantastic
with the
number.
lowest drop of any DC
Yeah.
movie, is doing poorly. And you're like, no, it isn't.
Let me tell you, man, places like Variety, Hollywood Reporter, all of them are terrible.
You gotta go to killerhorrorcritic.com if you want the real news.
No, but I mean, realistically though, like if you want anything genre related, you gotta go to the genre sites. These
do.
other sites
Yeah.
do not understand them whatsoever.
No. Yeah, this movie, I mean, the P&A will never see on these movies, but like with the critics,
I don't know why we don't release those numbers.
the Rotten Tomato for this has like a 9. It's a
Oh, yeah, it's
49.
9%.
It's a C- cinema score, which is if you get a C-, that means you are just everybody's
Listen,
walking out that bitch pissed.
Here's something I want to say to that too. You said it's a C- cinema
Yeah.
score. That makes no sense to me either because I think it was the Grudge got an F score.
Yeah.
And look, I gotta say, I didn't like that movie much either.
But that's
way better than this.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Ugh. So
So whatever
No
numbers they
sequel.
have, it's going to go down because in 2 weeks, Blumhouse eats itself.
Blumhouse is going to fight itself
Yeah.
in 2 weeks, and they're like, it doesn't. This is going to sound bad. This movie doesn't matter for Blumhouse because Halloween's coming out this
Right.
year.
They're going to have one that makes so much money.
Look,
They're like, we can throw these little $5 million, $10 million ones out, and like, who cares?
I gotta say this about Blumhouse as someone who's been a supporter of theirs for such a long time. I'm starting to lose it a bit with them. I'm really starting to lose respect for them because, you know, I still appreciate their model. They have a good model in that let's not spend a lot of money. Therefore, if we release a Fantasy Island, we still have a pretty good chance to make it back.
Right.
But they're getting so much to that point, though, that it's actually starting to feel to me like they do not give a fuck about
They're
their
literally
product.
just like
Yeah.
throwing out 7 bad products. Like, look, we got these 2. We know these 2 are going to
Yeah,
make money,
they'll-
so we'll pay for this.
They'll
little shit we
drop
keep
like
throwing out.
3 or 4 prestige movies a year and be like, "Oh, Blumhouse,"
Well,
but
but-
then you got to rake. It's like the Wii. There's just shovelware.
But at the same time, I used to look to them too as like a studio that would be giving us original content, right?
Yeah.
They
Right.
used to be a big supporter of that and bringing on directors to have these like new, different visions, you know, that they didn't have to spend a lot of money on. Now, Blumhouse looks like they've become the remake, reboot studio for horror. You know, that's all they seem to do.
I think
So-
the Halloween thing kind of worked to a detriment to them. They're like, oh, this seems to be working.
and I'm
Well,
a
right,
big,
and now they're talking about wanting to get rights to other big
Right.
franchises
Scream
like
and
that.
Friday the
Scream and Friday and
13th
Nightmare on
and-
Elm Street. You know, it's just
I'm a big like. I liked the new Halloween, and if we can kind of do that, but with Scream or Texas Chainsaw or something that I like, I'd love a new Friday the 13th and a new Nightmare on Elm Street. I don't think one guy gets to do it, which is
Yes.
very, very contradictory of me because I do think only Kevin Feige should make Marvel movies.
well, he's
He
earned
seems
the
to be
right to be able to do that.
He's gotten the cachet to
But
be
I
able to
also
do
am
that.
kind of like, Blumhouse has figured this out. How has no other studio been like, we're going to make a bunch of comedies, but you're not allowed to spend more than $8 million?
I don't know.
How has even like Disney been
Yeah,
like,
that's a good point.
we're only going to make Ant-Man, like tier their superhero movies. Avengers, you get 100 mil. Ant-Man's, you get 60 mil.
Right.
Captain Marvel, like,
Yeah.
and we now have so much data that there's no way they don't know their net profit based on what they spend.
Either way, I'm just disappointed in them because based on that model, they should be the studio that's giving
Yeah.
all of these directors chances to bring this new stuff to us, right? And instead, they're not. Like, I can't think of a single Blumhouse film coming out this year that's not their Into the Dark series that is original.
I was about to look that
the
up.
Hunt is the Hunt is the only one that they have.
I mean, yes, but even that.
But I'm glad you said that because I just looked up their stuff and I was like, their 2020 and 2021 is The Invisible Man, The Hunt, an Untitled Purge sequel, Halloween Kills, Paranormal 7, and the follow.
Exactly.
Jesus Christ.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is.
They used
So
to not
sad.
be that. When they started off, they were not that. So I'm just a comment I wanted to throw in there. Kind of let down by
That
them
is a
lately.
bit sad.
That is
yeah.
really depressing.
And I'm still, you know, I know that. Never mind. I won't say.
So Matt, where's the original horror coming from now? Is it like Platinum Dunes?
The-
Do we have to start looking to like
Fuck
the
no.
Quiet Place?
No, if you're listening to this and you're a horror fan, the original horror you're gonna find is studios like A24.
The Midsummers and all that stuff. Even though you may not like it, that's where it's
Right,
stuff
you
is
may
coming-
not like those kind of movies, but A24 is the one doing it. And then really after that, it's just a lot of independent studios. Dark Sky Pictures, or Entertainment, whatever. Epic Pictures, like Cranked Up Entertainment. A lot of these smaller companies are doing the really good original stuff. But yeah, when it comes to theatrical releases, it
really sucks
No one
as-
outside of A24 is doing these
Yeah.
back to back like good original horror movies.
It's yeah.
But that's our show. So if you want, you can leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Hollywood Already Did It. On Twitter, HollywoodADI. I'm at, as always, Blake, and Terrence is at Terrence Tatum. Matt is at The Killer Horror Critic, and every Friday his podcast about horror comes out, The Killer Horror Critic.
Yep, and I'm usually not this angry.
Great. And we'll see you next week.
Later.
Have a good one.